Grace to you all this morning, and peace from God our Father and from our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Amen. So any feedback, any reaction to that story about Jesus healing the Gerasene? The story has become titled after the fact as the healing of the Gerasene demoniac. There's a mouthful of words, right? The Gerasene demoniac. The man possessed by demons. That was the understanding of the culture at that time. Any reactions, any thoughts about that? Were there particular places in that experience in Jesus' life and ministry where you kind of felt yourself tense up a little bit or kind of get a little uncomfortable? Yeah, right.
I was upset a little by his nakedness.
His nakedness, right?
Yes, that's probably the first time that I felt upset by that.
Yeah. Do you want to say any more about that?
No, except that, that I'm envisioning all of these people around him having to deal with the fact that this man is not clothed, and as well as him being possessed. These things are quite upsetting.
Yeah, I hear you. I think that's true, right? Just the fact that he can't even have clothes on, he's so beside himself. Yeah, great, thank you. Trudy.
Whatever people fear, whatever they don't understand, they fear.
Whatever we don't understand, we fear. Right. And they didn't understand him.
They didn't understand.
Right.
They didn't understand the disease. They didn't understand
His disease. Right.
So they were afraid.
Yeah, good. Thanks. Brad, did you have your hand up?
I was just going to say that the herd of pigs running into the water.
Yeah.
It's a highly unusual.
It's weird. Yeah.
It was an interesting visual, when you're reading it. I mean, it's a really unusual thing. I think it added to the power of the story, the extraordinary piece of that.
That's a good word. It's pretty extraordinary, the whole story. Yeah. And then these pigs just sort of committing suicide, right? They killed themselves. Right? Yeah, sort of. Marilyn.
I was puzzled about the second part.
About the pigs.
Maybe because the demons begged Jesus not to send them back.
Right.
And he let them come out and go into the herd of swine, but the herd of swine, then he really didn't come down.
Right. So what happens to the demons then that were possessing the swine? Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Jesus was not going to send them to hell, but he sent them to their destruction.
Yeah. Right. Good. Thanks. Glenn.
Not to be a pessimist, but I was like, 3 days later, a lake full of floating pigs. This is going to be an issue. The aftermath,
Yeah.
Free bacon.
Yeah. Right. And then Brian. Right.
I was just kind of concerned about how I have missed this whole reading in my career, in my life. I don't know, this is the first time I've heard this. Where have I been? As anyone else, I've never heard this particular reading.
Other people have that reaction? Same thing, right? That is very interesting because this reading comes up every 3 years. So you would have to miss this Sunday every 3 years to miss this reading. I'm just saying, I'm not trying to right? Yeah, okay, good. Brian.
Well, I was reflecting that we as a society haven't really changed that much. Because even now we struggle with putting blinders on when we have people in our community with mental illness. And we just kind of look, instead of helping, like Jesus did, help to solve that man's problem, we tend to do what they did. Shackles, lock them up, try to get him as far away from society as possible.
Don't know what to do with him? Right, so let's put him in a state hospital, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think we all remember, many of us will remember those days when that's what you did with people that you didn't understand and feared. You would lock them up somewhere. And we still do that, you're right. Yeah. Good point. Let's see, I got Bill and Tony. So Bill, go ahead.
One I hadn't seen before, his name, he calls himself Legion.
Legion.
And I was thinking of all the demons inside of it, but kind of putting a political spin on it. Legion also is the way the army was organized, the Roman army was organized, right? And maybe the people's reaction, obviously Jesus is upsetting the ruling, the army, and so maybe the people were afraid that the Romans are going to have not going to be pleased with what Jesus is doing. And so they're afraid that, leave us alone, we don't like the situation, but it's better than, the known enemy is better than the unknown enemy.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, better the devil you know. Yeah, good, thank you. Tony?
Well, that's kind of following up on a couple of other comments. It's almost, I wouldn't say an empathy, but an understanding of the discomfort that I'm sure we all have about how somebody who is not of right mind, so to speak, is in our midst, and you don't know how to deal with it. You feel uncomfortable about it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Good. Anybody else have a thought? Paul?
Just strikes me as Jesus did this act, this great thing here, and everything, pigs go running down and all this stuff's going on, and then the people say, well, Jesus, please get out of here. We really can't have you here. Please, this is too scary, there's too much going on here. I don't know what it is, but please, goodbye.
Yeah, yeah.
I was kind of disturbed when I heard that they were going to possess the pigs. Like, why pigs? Can't you do it to some other disgusting animal? Because pigs are awesome.
Pigs are awesome. Right, why does it have to do with pigs? Yeah, good, thanks. Anybody else? Terry?
I have a question. So what caused the pigs to commit suicide, the demons or the pigs?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. Good. Okay. So this is my way of getting out of preaching today. So disclaimer, I don't have time to answer all those questions, and I don't have the answers to all your questions. But I'm happy to engage you in conversation about that at another time. But you raise a lot of really important reactions to this story. And I think for me, one of the most revealing is that sense that I never heard this before, and I'm sure you have, right? I'm going to say, take a leap of faith here and say, I'm sure you have, but it's such a disturbing story. I think we put it out of our minds. There's so much discomfort and anxiety and fear going on in this story that it's not the kind of story that you really embrace, like Jesus carrying sheep on his shoulders, right? This is like, I don't know what to do with this. There are the pigs and the reaction of the people and the man and the crowds, and it reminds me that if you put yourself for a moment in the shoes of the disciples, it was not an easy gig following Jesus. This kind of stuff happened all the time. People were, and not on this magnitude, right? This man, if you read through the healing stories of Jesus, this man seems to be on a certain level the most afflicted by his demons, literally, right? Legion is a number is an organization of the Roman army, and I believe it's about 6,000 soldiers are in a legion. So this man is possessed by 6,000 demons. But this intrusion of chaos into Jesus' ministry happens all the time. And what you notice as well in this story with all this turmoil going on is that the one place at the beginning of the story and through most of it, the one place of peace and strength is Jesus. We don't hear about the disciples at all. They cross over with him. We know that from the very first line, but then we don't hear anything else about them. So we kind of get the feeling that as often the image comes up in our minds, that they're kind of huddled over here going, what the heck is going on? Let's just stay over here and see what happens, right? And then there are the townspeople and this poor man who's so deeply afflicted for such a long time, at such a deep level. One of the things that caught my attention reading this story again is that they chained the man and he broke the chains. Like, what kind of power and frustration does it take for him to just want to get away from everyone and everything? Hence his nakedness, to be not connected to anything of the world at all, because he just can't bear it because of the illness that has overcome him, the disease that afflicts him. And in the midst of all of this, there's the calm Jesus who right? Given our reaction to people who have mental illness and our discomfort about that and not knowing what to do. Here's Jesus, he walks up to the man, or the man actually comes up to him, and he engages the demons in conversation, right? So tell me about yourselves, what's your story in there? And they respond to him. And they respond to him out of fear. What have you to do with us, right? So more contemporary English translation of that phrase would be, uh-oh. That's what the demons are saying, right? They're going, uh-oh, we are in trouble here. And then they beg for their lives. That's wild. Here are demons begging for their lives to Jesus because they know that he has power over them. And he sends them into the pigs. And yeah, Jerry, that's a phenomenal question, right? Did the pigs commit suicide because now they were demon-possessed, or the demons commit suicide? But then there's this chaotic scene of the pigs running down and drowning themselves because we have a hard time with people. So if you accept the story at face value for its time and place, if you think people have a hard time being demon-possessed, pigs couldn't handle it, right? That's one way to look at it. But there in the midst of the chaos is this very calm, this very peaceful Jesus who recognizes his own power and uses it on behalf of this man to totally transform his life. Totally transform his life. So there are two other things I want to focus on in our conversation together. And one of them is a point that you made, Paul, about the reaction of the people, the townspeople. And twice in this retelling of the story by Luke, he tells us they were afraid. So they hear what happened, they come out, they're afraid, and then they engage Jesus in conversation, and they do that, they ask him to leave, and Luke tells us again, because they were afraid. So my question to you is, again, a question for you, what do you think they were afraid of? Maybe I'll ask you, Paul, because you mentioned it. What were they afraid of?
I think it's just too much. I mean, this is so different than reality. What's up with this?
Yes, it's kind of like, yeah, Lachlan.
It could also be because some of those people could have been the people that were guards for the prisons that they were watching, and if there was no other people with demons, there would be no one for them to watch and they'd get fired. If you think about that, people would lose their jobs because Jesus was there.
That's interesting, yeah. It's a change. I think on one level, what they're afraid of is change. The devil, right? We may fear this possessed man. We may not know what to do with him because we tried, right? We locked him up, we chained him, and he keeps breaking out. But at least we have all made the adjustment to his behavior. The whole town has made an adjustment to his behavior. And now the townspeople come out, and this man that they've learned to fear and deal with, adapt to, is sitting at the feet of Jesus, and he's got clothes on, warning sign number 1, right? Okay, and he's calm, and they don't know what to do. So do we invite him to dinner now? Do we help him find a job? Do we help employ those who used to protect us from him? What do we do? Life was settled. It was predictable. It was orderly, and it's not anymore. And that's because of you, Jesus. You messed things up. I mean, they would never say that out loud, probably, but that's their feeling. You've shifted the whole balance of what we've come to expect, and we're not happy. So. And we don't understand your power. I think that's another dimension of this reaction to Jesus. We don't understand your power. We don't understand why you did what you did and how you did it. And so, since you're an unknown quantity, we'd rather you leave because we feel threatened by you. And the number one thing that people fear in life is change. And so here's this whole community that has had this dramatic change, and they don't know what to do with it. And they're looking for a new normal. And so they ask Jesus to leave because he's upset the normal. And they figure we'll figure it out on our own, right? And are Go ahead.
It just points out how the radical love that Jesus had for people, and, I mean, this is an image of God. Who else but God could do this? That's scary, to be in God's presence.
Yes, especially, yeah,
I'm thinking of the images
Yes.
in some of them in Revelation and in Isaiah, you know, the house was filled with smoke and,
yeah, and
this is,
it's either right before this or right after this, and we'll find out next week, right? Where the disciples are out on the boat in a storm, and they're frightened to death. They're afraid they're going to lose their lives, and Jesus comes walking across the water to them and calms the storm. Or he's asleep in the boat, and he calms the storm, and then you get the feeling that they all want to jump overboard because the threat is not outside the boat, it's inside the boat. Who is this, they say, who can even calm the wind and the waves? It's that presence of God in your life that stirs things up, that challenges you, that forces you to find a new normal with God, which isn't always easy. Okay, am I speaking about your situation now? Am I speaking about mine? Absolutely. I don't know what to do with this. I don't have a new normal yet, neither do you, but it's coming. It's coming, and it's going to be okay. Because there is that man, and he's sitting there, and all of a sudden he's a transformed person. God helps us to find a new normal, which is better than the old one. In the case of this man who's possessed by demons, there's hope for him in the midst of this person who has brought him healing and strength and power. God helps us to take that next step. So the second point that I want to share with you is that interesting aspect of the story in which the man says to Jesus, let me go with you. This is wonderful. I want to hold on to this. You healed me. I want to hang around with you because you've given me this gift. And Jesus tells him no. Which, when I first heard that story, or somewhere along the way when I heard the story, I thought, that's kind of mean. Don't desert him. But Jesus gives him a mission and a purpose. This man who is on the fringe of society is now invited by Jesus to immerse himself in that society as a healed person. And what does he have to do, right? Does Jesus commission him to change everything? Does Jesus commission him to overturn the world? Does Jesus commission him to make so many converts a week? No. What does Jesus tell him to do? This is my question to you again. What does Jesus tell him to do?
tell what happened Jesus did for you.
Yes. Tell your story about what God did for you, what Jesus did for you. That's all. The guy doesn't have to make it up. He doesn't have to go to training school. He doesn't have to go to seminary. He doesn't have to take any kind of classes. He just has to tell his story about the power of God in his life, which for him was dramatic. But isn't it true for you too? Hasn't God been dramatically present in your life at times? With a transformational power, and all God asks us to do is tell our story. Just tell that story. But you know, we don't want to. I understand. We're a little bit shy. It's not that great a story, right? This guy has a great story. Who wouldn't sit down and listen to his story? Maybe if we could make our story a little more dramatic, people would be interested. But it's not our story then. God just asks us to tell our story. And sometimes we're afraid, not only that nobody wants to hear it, but that they'll be bored by it, or they won't be impressed by it, or that it won't have the intended effect. But again, listen to what Jesus tells the man. Tell what happened to you. Tell what God did for you. You've all got that story. He doesn't say make sure people understand. He doesn't say write a book, right? He doesn't say and start a speaker series, be a self-help guy, be the new Tony Robbins, or the old Tony Robbins, I guess in this case, right? He simply says tell the story and don't worry about the results. Don't worry about how you're received. Because it's going to be, for this man, right, it's going to be really scary. People go, wait, you're that crazy guy. There's back to how we treat people with mental illness. They get labeled the crazy person and can't break out of that box. And this guy has to break out of that box by simply telling his story from who he is. And that's our call. And maybe for some of you today, and for me on a regular basis, part of that response to the call is figuring out what your story is. What is it? What has God done for you? And how do you celebrate that? And how do you share that? And then to take that story and just let it be who you are. And let it change you and the world around you. That's certainly a very important aspect that we ourselves, right, are to learn from this story about what it means to be God's people in the world. And how we treat others. And especially today in this story, how we treat people who happen to be victims of mental illness. How we even talk about that. Do we call them crazy people? Or do we see them as victims of mental illness? I was at I'm wrapping it up in case you're keeping time. I was at a seminar on Monday at New York Presbyterian Hospital here in White Plains, the psychiatric facility. It was wonderful. Religion and mental health. It was for spiritual caregivers. And they said, at the very beginning of the presentation, the presenter said, think for a moment of somebody you know who has cancer. How do you react to them? With compassion, you pray for them. Think for a moment of somebody you know who has mental illness. How do you react to them? We step back, we protect ourselves. And the person was very clear that you shouldn't get into a situation that you don't know how to deal with, but you should still treat people with illness with compassion, whatever that illness is. And that strength, that power that Jesus brings into those relationships is ours to bring into those relationships. The strength, calm, power to just listen to that other person's story and to accept them as a child of God when maybe they can't even see themselves that way is such a precious gift. So there's so much here. We could go on and on talking about this story. I'm sure some of you have other reactions and thoughts about what was going on. We didn't even solve the pig question, right? But maybe this is a sermon that keeps going in your hearts and minds way after our service ends today. So I hope so. But we hear good message. We hear good news, as always when we come together, that Jesus becomes that place of calm and peace. And if we're feeling fear, if we're feeling overwhelmed, if we're feeling anxious, it's because we have lost our connection to Jesus. Like this man and like the people in that town. But in the midst of that struggle, here's what I hope you will hold on to. That Jesus never loses his connection to us.